I want to tell you something plainly, without decoration. Walking alone in life is not a failure. It is not a sign that you missed something, nor proof that you are unlovable or broken. The real truth is far more unsettling and far more liberating than that. Let me ask you something before we continue. Have you ever felt that your path seemed strangely solitary, even when you tried to belong? If that question resonates with you, I invite you to say so in the comments below, not for sympathy, but for recognition. Here is a fact most people resist. Every meaningful journey is walked alone at its deepest point. Others may walk beside you for a time, but no one can think your thoughts, feel your fears, or make sense of your life on your behalf. Pretending otherwise only postpones the realization. From early childhood, we are trained to fear walking alone. We are taught that success looks like fitting in, that happiness looks like being chosen, and that meaning must be shared to be real. This conditioning is powerful, and it quietly shapes how we judge our lives. But notice the consequence. The moment you measure your worth by companionship, walking alone begins to feel like rejection. You assume that if others are not walking with you, something must be wrong with you. This assumption is rarely questioned, yet it governs countless decisions. Here is an argument worth considering carefully. The fear of walking alone often keeps people walking in the wrong direction. They follow paths that feel crowded but empty, familiar but lifeless, simply to avoid the discomfort of solitude. Walking alone does not mean you dislike people. It means you are no longer willing to abandon yourself to be accompanied. And that distinction changes everything. Many people walk together not because they are aligned, but because they are afraid. Afraid of silence, afraid of uncertainty, afraid of discovering that their life does not make sense unless someone else agrees with it. Shared fear can look remarkably like friendship. This is why walking alone feels so exposed. Without the buffer of constant agreement, you are left with your own questions. Questions about purpose, direction, and identity. And unlike group answers, these questions do not arrive neatly packaged. Let me be clear about something that is often misunderstood. Walking alone is not the same as being lonely. Loneliness is the feeling of being cut off from life. Walking alone is often the feeling of being directly in it, without intermediaries. When you walk alone, you begin to notice how much of social life is choreography. Conversations repeat, opinions recycle, ambitions echo one another. This does not make people shallow. It reveals how much we rely on shared scripts to feel safe. The person who steps off the script becomes difficult to place. Others may not oppose you openly, but a subtle distance appears. Not because you are wrong, but because you are no longer predictable. Here is a call to thought. How often have you softened your questions, edited your curiosity, or muted your insight, just to remain included? Walking alone begins the moment you stop doing that. And the cost is immediate. Familiar approval fades. Easy belonging dissolves. But something else appears in its place: clarity. Clarity is not comforting at first. It removes excuses. It strips away the illusion that someone else will eventually tell you who you are and what you should do. It returns responsibility to where it always belonged. There is also a quiet dignity in walking alone, not the dramatic kind that seeks admiration, but the grounded kind that does not need witnesses. When you stop performing your life, your steps become slower, heavier, and more deliberate. This is why many people mistake walking alone for arrogance or detachment. In truth, it is often humility. You no longer assume you know enough to lead others, nor do you pretend others should lead you. Another fact rarely spoken aloud is this: walking alone refines perception. Without constant reinforcement from others, you begin to see your own patterns more clearly. Your fears become obvious. Your habits become transparent. And this can feel uncomfortable, even unsettling. But discomfort is not danger. It is adjustment. Like eyes learning to see in low light, awareness sharpens when distractions fall away. If you are walking alone right now, Resist the urge to label it as a temporary problem to be solved. Instead, ask what it is revealing. What are you noticing now that you could not see before? Now let us look at why walking alone often feels heavier before it feels freeing, because this is the point where many people turn back. The weight you feel is not emptiness, it is responsibility. And responsibility, when first encountered honestly, can feel overwhelming. Here is a fact worth facing directly. When you walk alone, you can no longer outsource meaning. There is no group to hide behind, no shared narrative to borrow, no consensus to soften your doubts. You must decide what matters, and that decision carries weight. This is why solitude often feels tiring at first. Not because you are doing too much, but because you are no longer avoiding yourself. You are meeting your own life without witnesses, and that demands sincerity. Many people believe that confidence comes from certainty, but deep confidence comes from the willingness to live without it. Walking alone forces you to admit what you do not know, and that admission can feel like weakness. In reality, it is the beginning of intelligence. Another reason the path feels heavy is that you begin to see how often your choices were shaped by approval. When that approval fades, motivation changes. You no longer act to be seen. You act because something feels true, and truth rarely shouts. It speaks quietly and requires patience to hear. Here is an argument that may challenge you. Much of the exhaustion people feel in life comes from living according to expectations that are not their own. When you walk alone, those expectations loosen, and the body and mind must recalibrate. This transition feels like fatigue, but it is actually release in progress. Walking alone also removes convenient distractions. Without constant conversation, noise, or affirmation, unresolved emotions surface. Regret, grief, doubt, and fear may rise uninvited. This does not mean you are moving backward. It means you finally stopped running. Ask yourself this honestly. What feelings have you been postponing by staying busy, agreeable, or surrounded? The weight of walking alone is also the weight of choice. You can no longer blame circumstance or group momentum for where you are headed. Each step becomes deliberate. And deliberate steps feel heavier because they are real. But here is the paradox. As you continue, something subtle shifts. The same weight that once felt burdensome begins to feel stabilizing. Like carrying your own body upright for the first time, strength develops through use. You begin to trust your pace. You stop rushing to arrive. You realize that walking alone does not mean walking aimlessly. It means walking honestly, even when the destination is unclear. Another important truth emerges here. When you walk alone, you are less tempted to compare your progress. Comparison requires parallel paths. Your path is no longer parallel, it is particular. And this frees you from the constant anxiety of measurement. This is where many people misunderstand freedom. Freedom is not the absence of limits. It is the acceptance of responsibility without resentment. Walking alone teaches this not as an idea, but as an experience. If you feel tired on this path, do not judge yourself. Fatigue is not a sign you are failing. It is often a sign that you are no longer divided. Energy once spent maintaining appearances is now being reclaimed. Now let us speak about what happens when the weight settles, because this is where walking alone reveals its quiet reward. Something changes in the way you relate to yourself, and from that change, everything else follows. Here is a simple fact. When you learn to walk alone without resentment, you stop needing constant reassurance. You no longer look to others to confirm that your life makes sense. Meaning becomes something you live, not something you negotiate. This does not make you distant. It makes you present. When you are no longer preoccupied with belonging, you can actually meet people as they are. You listen without calculating. You speak without defending. You connect without clinging. Walking alone also transforms how you experience companionship. When someone walks with you now, It is not because you need them to complete the journey. It is because your paths genuinely intersect. And when they diverge, there is gratitude rather than panic. Here is an argument worth reflecting on. The deepest form of connection is not agreement, but mutual freedom. Two people walking side by side, neither trying to lead nor follow, neither demanding nor resisting. This kind of companionship is only possible when you are able to stand on your own. Another quiet shift occurs in how you understand belonging. You realize that belonging is not something granted by a group. It is something you allow yourself. You belong wherever you are fully present. This is why walking alone often leads to a broader sense of connection. You feel less defined by labels and more attuned to shared humanity. You recognize fragments of yourself in strangers, not because you seek sameness, but because you see difference without threat. There is also a deep peace that arises when you stop demanding that life move in formation. You no longer interpret detours as mistakes. You no longer rush to explain your path. You let it unfold. Ask yourself this: how much energy have you spent trying to justify where you are instead of simply being there? Walking alone teaches you patience with uncertainty. It shows you that not knowing is not a failure of intelligence, but a condition of being alive. And in that not knowing, curiosity replaces fear. This does not mean you never feel lonely again. It means loneliness no longer defines you. It becomes a passing mood, not a permanent identity. You feel it, acknowledge it, and continue walking. Here is the final truth I want to leave you with. Walking alone in life is not about separation. It is about integrity. It is about refusing to fracture yourself for the sake of comfort. And that refusal, while costly, is also liberating. If you are walking alone right now, do not assume you are behind. You may simply be ahead of the crowd in a direction that cannot be traveled in groups. Walk at your pace. Carry your weight. Trust the ground beneath you. And when companionship appears, let it be a meeting, not a rescue.